The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific. Yeah! It's Cartoonerific. Cartoonerific. It's Cartoonerific. With your host Brian Mitchell.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Cartoonerific podcast, Classic Animated Cartoons. I am Brian Mitchell, and I am your host. You know, back in 1979, 1980, I was going to school for animation. Actually, I went to the School of Visual Arts, and basically I was taking a film program with animation. My instructors for animation, it was basically three people. It was Marty Abrams, who was doing a lot of stuff in New York for HBO and different companies. Then you had Gil Moret, who was a designer, and he worked at Paramount with Howard Beckerman. And the third person was Howard Beckerman. And Howard Beckerman, you hear a lot of people say, and this, he just passed away this past Saturday. And I've been hearing a lot of people say he was New York Animation. And I thought about that. I was like, he really was, because Howard started in the business working at the New York studios. And I don't think he ever left New York. He worked for Terry Toons, the UPA branch in New York, Paramount Famous Studios. So he worked on all that stuff. And there was another company, Rankin Bass, that did they did a lot of specials. And so Howard was involved with one of the early ones. I think it was the Oz special for NBC. And he had worked on a lot of different things. He had his hand in a lot of different things. And he was doing animation, and he was doing story. He was a very talented guy. He had a very great sense of humor. In the 70s and 80s, he became an educator, and so he was teaching at School of Visual Arts. But he also maintained a studio of his own on 45th Street in Manhattan. And so he was still doing things. He was doing projects I'm sure he worked on Sesame Street, but he was doing a lot of commercial work. When I got to Visual Arts and I met him, he was a kind of a magical kind of guy, very pixie-ish. He ended up coming over to my parents' home on Long Island. It was a little visit, and we had just gone apple picking upstate, and we had bushels of apples around. And so we gave him a big bag full of apples to take with him. And the result of that, which happens, I guess, in the cartooning world, is you get a cartoon back. And the cartoon was it was a one-panel thing, and it was a caricature of himself and just apples all over the place. And the caption was, "Look, honey, the Mitchells gave us apples." So it was a funny drawing, and it was so much appreciated. Howard hired me to work at his studio, and this is the thing. It was just him and his wife. So basically, he brought me in, and I started off painting cells. It was interesting work. It was fun. I thought it was a wonderful thing that he hired me to work at his studio, and it was short-lived. I didn't work there too long, but it was fun. I just want to say thank you, Howard. Thank you for all the joy that you've given, and all the help that you've given all these students and all these people that have enjoyed your work, whether it's reading your articles about animation or the films that you made. You were absolutely amazing, and sad to see you go. Patrick Smith is our guest today on the Cartoonerific podcast. Patrick is a New York animator. And he is a terrific animator, and he's won so many awards for his work. He has a new film that just came out last week called Broken, and I'm really excited to talk with him because he's really, somebody that has made a living doing films and putting them on YouTube. And so that was something that perked up my ears, and I think you might get something out of it as well. So he is coming on next, so please stay tuned. Don't go away.
You're listening to the Cartoonerific Podcast, classic animated cartoons with your host animator, Brian Mitchell. And now it's time for our special Cartoonerific guest.
Well, today's guest, he's a New York animator. Basically, he's worked in a lot of New York studios, MTV, and commercial studios here. And then he became an independent animator, working on a whole bunch of these independent films. And his 2019 film, Poor 585, is probably one of the five. It says it's one of the 5 most viewed animated shorts on YouTube. So he's doing independent films, and he's been very successful doing this stuff. He's making a living doing this, and his films are excellent. The list of awards that this gentleman has received is basically, if you put it on a scroll and let it roll down, that's kind of gives you an idea. One thing right after the other. But he's a late bloomer, but he's a very talented gentleman. And I'm really glad. I'm actually very excited to have him on today. So please welcome Mr. Patrick Smith. How are you, Patrick? How are you doing today?
How's it going, Brian? Thank you for having me today.
Oh, thank you for coming on here. I really appreciate it. Independent animators, there's quite a few out there. But I don't think anybody's had the success that you've had. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've done pretty well with your films, like the Poor series. I think you have another one coming out soon, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, where'd you grow up? And were you into animation as a kid, or?
No, I grew up. I kind of was everywhere. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I moved around the country growing up. But I don't know if that had any influence in my animation. I didn't get interested in animation until I was in college.
Wow.
And it was, I actually was I was really into snowboarding and skateboarding. And,
okay.
I got injured seriously my junior year of college, and I found myself just looking at books a lot in the library because I couldn't ride. And that's when I first picked up Illusion of Life.
By Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston.
Frank and Ollie's classic book, and it was before that day and after that day. Everything changed. Almost like buying a house or getting married or having a kid. It was this pivotal point with me, and I realized I was like, you know what, I don't know, because I never knew what I wanted to do or anything like that. But I picked up that book. I said, this is incredible. These people are drawing these things, and they're not just illustrations. They're carving out illustrations through time. They're acting. They're making stories, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do it, but I knew instantly that that's what I wanted to do. And ever since then, I've been trying.
Was there anything in that book that was it when you flip through the drawing, because it had, that book has like a little circle on the top, and it's basically, they'll have different scenes, kind of like, maybe an inch or 2 inches, right? And you could actually flip the drawings there. Were you doing some of that, or was it just a general?
I wasn't that good. I'm not naive. I think the thing about that book is that it's technique heavy. It explains the nuts and bolts behind the process, and it doesn't romanticize it or anything like that. It really tells you what it is to animate, and it's difficult. Right. But the result is really beautiful. And I don't know, there was something about it. Maybe it was a call to a challenge or something like that. Mm-hmm. the mechanics behind hand-drawn animation is what fascinated me.
Wow.
Of course I was I got seduced by the whole Disney thing because Walt Disney Studio brought this technique to such a maximum level that helped to respect that. And I got into that, and then I started watching all the classic Disney movies, which I knew, but I had never looked at them in this way. I've never looked at them in this mechanical way. And I never really thought like, oh wait, I can actually sit down and draw one of these. It was wild to me because I've always been kind of a loner and a one-man show, and animation seemed perfect for a person like me.
Yeah. So how'd you go about that? Now it's okay. You have to. Well, you got to learn to draw.
There was a way to get around that. It was a funny story. Is
right.
I got into anime, so I picked up that book. I was at University of Massachusetts. They didn't really have much of an animation program.
Right.
I switched my major to art because at the time, I don't know, I think I was a geology or forestry major or something. I really wasn't interested in art.
Mm-hmm.
But after that point, I switched over to art. I got into the painting department, which is pretty cool.
Right.
I tried drawing cartoons, and I wasn't that good. But what really happened was I couldn't draw, but for some reason I was able to. I always had good timing. I was always able to kind of understand the timing element of animation, and if I was given a talent, that was the talent I had.
Right.
So I got into abstract stuff, weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the weird stuff because it didn't rely too hard on drawing, the ability to draw, because I could just kind of make it so weird that it was unrecognizable.
Right.
So I sat down. I did this bizarre cycle of this head opening up and revealing other heads. It's very similar to Bill Plimpton's work, which
mm-hmm.
I wasn't exposed to his work yet at that point.
Right.
It ended up being very Plimptonian, and I sent it randomly. I sent it to MTV Networks because at the time they were doing these MTV ID spots.
Right.
They were hiring independent animators, and there was an interview with Abby Toccoli in Animation Magazine,
mm-hmm.
which I started reading just to try to educate myself about animation. And I sent them a pencil test, and I heard back from them.
Wow.
Yeah, I got the address from the phone book, and I sent it to him. I sent him a VHS tape. And he wrote back. He goes, "Oh yeah, let's produce this. This is wild. This is weird. We like it." I was 22 years old, and I didn't really know how to go about that at all.
Right. Right.
I managed to produce the spot, and it ended up winning a lot of awards, and it kind of catapulted me into the industry. Even though I wasn't ready, I still couldn't draw.
Right.
But that's how I first got in to the industry part of it. And what I did is since I didn't learn it in school, I figured maybe I could just get a job and start learning on the job, and that's what I did.
Right. What did they offered you a job over there, didn't they? After the
it was a funny accident. It was I did the ID spot, and
mm-hmm.
during production of the MTV ID spot, I had to make a phone call down there for some random reason. Mm-hmm. And there was a girl on the phone, Sarah Duffy, who I actually ended up working with. She just goes, "Oh, are you calling about the job on Beavis and Butthead?" And I wasn't. I was calling about something completely different. And I looked at it. It was on the phone, but I was like, "Yeah." I just said yes. And she goes, "Okay, let me connect you over to another person, Dominique Mall, who was the producer." And I was like kind of on the phone, freaked out. I was like, "Oh, what am I doing here?" And Dominique Mall got on the phone, and she's like, "Oh yeah, good to hear from you." Never heard from her. I never called her before.
Right.
But she, in the introduction, I said, "Oh yeah, well, I'm actually producing an MTV ID spot there, and I'm definitely interested in a job on Beavis and Butthead."
Wow.
And that's how I got the job on Beavis and Butthead. It was completely accidental.
So,
and I went down there and I got a job. I got hired on layout for Beavis, which was perfect because Beavis and Butthead is a pretty crudely drawn show.
Right.
And my drawing skills really weren't up there, and it was really the perfect job to start off with. The whole thing was accidental. It was pretty funny.
Wow. I've heard stories like this, and it's like there's somebody I worked with over at Warner Brothers that he wasn't even. I had him on the podcast. His name was John Over, but he was not an artist. He was not trained. He was not. And he could doodle a little bit. He could draw a little bit. And so his wife at the time, they were passing by. They knew where Warner Brothers Animation was, and they were hiring. And he dropped off a couple of drawings, and they hired him, just like because they needed him. And it was crazy. Yeah. And he's been working in the field ever since. So some people just fall into it, and it's crazy. It's crazy, and it's wonderful, and it's amazing, and all that wonderful
I also
stuff.
think when you're that young and you're that hungry, you tend to, those kind of things tend to happen more often, just because, I woke up in the morning, I thought about animation. I went to bed thinking about animation. I was obsessed with animation. It's all I think about. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's still that way, even though I'm 52. I'm still
Right.
I still wake up thinking about animation every day. And
right.
but if you're that young, I think things like that tend to happen when you have that much energy. And,
Yeah.
And it was a smaller world back then too. There weren't many animators in New York.
That's right.
It was a smaller crowd.
Yeah. I used to teach back in the 90s. I used to teach animation, and a lot of the guys, a lot of the people that took classes with me, they ended up working in the business. But we had a student in class. His name was Patrick Smith, and when I saw your name, I said, "Well, I wonder if it's that guy." It's another Patrick Smith. So I know you never took a class.
There's another indie animator, Patrick Smith, who does really cool stuff. He does a lot of more computer-based graphic stuff, but really cool stuff.
Pretty interesting. So how did that experience go with layout on there?
Well, it was awesome. I mean, layout, if you remember in the 90s, well, you were around. It was, storyboards, layout were done here, and then all the animation is shipped overseas.
Right.
And layout for me was great because I sat next to Mike Baez, who was, he animated a lot of the stuff that I really admired, and he's an older guy. Mm-hmm. And then I also sat next to my cubicle mate was Bill Schwab, who now is head of design at Disney, and it was such a cool era to be in animation in New York in the 90s. It was just so cool. And I still, to this day, feel so lucky that I somehow slipped in there. It was a cool time. And like I said, I learned on the job.
Right.
I'd always ask him, Mike Baez, for example, I would always ask him, I was like, what are you working on? What are you doing? And he used to give me all these, he loved drawing horses. And I used to in between all his horse animations just for fun.
Right.
And stuff like that really taught me how to draw and taught me the process and how to do it.
Yeah, traditionally, when people entered the business, they'd enter as an in-betweener. So,
I had to do that for free, but also there was a lot of cool opportunities. MTV was a very hot place then. There was, they had the music video awards that they always used a lot of in-house animation. So
right.
we always all the artists at the MTV Animation contributed to the VMAs. And also, a lot of people they continued doing ID spots even after mine. I never got another one. I pitched a few, but I never got another one.
Right.
And there were a lot of projects going on there. And I even though I was doing Beavis, I would hop over to Nickelodeon, which was another Viacom company. Sure. When they needed help, I went over and did stuff there. And like I said, I was hungry, and I would say yes to every single job that came along. And that defined the first 5 years of my career.
Wow. Just refresh my memory. Was Nickelodeon Animation also in the same building with? I guess it would be. It's MTV.
Well, it was down the
Network.
street. So at the time, I was hired when MTV moved to 1633 Broadway. They moved down from what is now I think the Trump Tower. Now it was bought, right? And then they moved down to 1633. And then Nickelodeon was in 1515, which was the main building down the street.
Oh wow, that's the big black building, right?
Yeah. Okay. But there was a lot of action between the two buildings. There was a lot of artists walking between the two buildings.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. When did you make the leap from layout to what was the next thing you ended up doing over there?
Let me see. I gave. I worked on Beavis and Butthead. Then they were doing the movie. Oh wow! And I was one of the. There weren't actually, even though there were a lot of artists, on Beavis and doing stuff, but there were very few animators. So I ended up animating on the movie, I did that weird stuff like my ID spot, the really crazy weird morphing stuff. Oh wow! So I was hired to animate the hallucination sequence on the movie, the Beavis and Butthead movie. Oh cool! They're in the desert and they eat mushrooms or something.
Right.
This big hallucination sequence. It was directed by Chris Pronowski, and it was designed by Rob Zombie.
Wow.
And I ended up animating on that and a couple other things. And then that was the point where I started jumping around to other studios as well. I went down to Disney had just bought Jumbo Pictures, so I went down there.
Right.
Got a storyboard job on that, which was really educational.
Was that Doug or more Doug?
That was on Doug, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I went back to MTV, and then I started directing. I directed Daria, and then I directed another Chris Pronowski show, Downtown.
Downtown, yeah.
And then just to condense it even quicker, I started directing commercials, and during this time, I was starting to work on my first independent short, which leads me to where I am now, really. But my first short was my film Drink, which I finished in 1999. So,
okay, so the commercials, were you doing that on your own? Was that like your own?
No, the first commercials I did was MTV opened up a small commercial studio to do advertising commercials. The executive producer was Nick Latwanko, and we did a bunch of cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I did a Southwest Airlines commercial, which was really fun.
Right.
And a few other little things, sometimes for MTV, sometimes outside of MTV. But it was short-lived. I kind of stuck around longer than I was welcome there.
Right.
And finally I started getting, I got a job on my own. I got a couple commercials on my own, and that's when me and Tony Cernage was a background painter at MTV.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also on Doug. He was also a really pretty well-known graffiti artist. Me and him, we shared a studio in Tribeca. We rented a studio.
Wow.
That was in 2001. That was the beginning of my independent career right there. So actually my studio career was kind of short-lived if you think about it. It was only like 5 or 6 years. And then me and Tony, we had that studio until I moved to Singapore, which was a 9-year run or something like that.
Wow.
Doing films and doing commercials.
What kind of commercials were you doing? Do you remember?
Well, the big one, the cash cow of the studio was the Zoloft campaign.
Oh,
we
okay.
did that little dot, the little depressed blob.
Right.
It was huge. It was, we animated that. Oh my gosh, I did that for years, and it paid a lot, and it was very easy to do.
Right.
And so it really, that really hooked me up, and that subsidized my independent work, which didn't really pay anything.
Right.
Back then there was no money in independent shorts. It was shorts back then it was a calling card for commercial work.
Yeah, for something else. Yeah.
But that changed with streaming media.
Yeah, absolutely. You said the first short you did was Drink.
Yeah.
And that was that between you starting the studio, your own studio, or?
That was before. I did Drink while I was at MTV still. I'd wake up like really early. Well, compared to what I wake up now, it's not even early. But back then I used to think 6 a.m. was early. Yeah. But I'd wake up at 6 a.m. and I'd work from 6 to 9 and then go to work at 10.
Right.
MTV started at 10 a.m. Wow. And I just work every morning on my film before I went into work. I was working on Daria at the time.
How were you? You were doing on a pencil on an animation desk, right?
That was pencil and paper, colored in Photoshop. And it was actually, it was colored in Photoshop. I had a lot of help. A lot of employees at MTV helped me out coloring. People that wanted to learn Photoshop would come down, and I'd give them a bunch of stills to color. Yeah.
And do you remember where you shot it? Or did you shoot it on a?
Well, it was. I've never shot with film, with an Oxberry or anything like that. This was digital.
It's all digital. Okay.
Even my MTV ID spot was digital. I think I was a very early adopter of digital color and everything. I've never painted a cell or anything like that.
Wow.
So I scanned the drawings in, colored in Photoshop, composited in After Effects. Pretty much exactly what I do now. Honestly.
Right.
Outside of the fact that I work on a Cintiq now, I do it the exact same way.
But you're not. Are you still using Photoshop, or are you using an animation?
Well, I color in. I do Adobe Animate now.
Okay.
But I use Photoshop. I mean, I jump into Photoshop all the time. I mean, it's my go-to painting app.
Right.
And then After Effects, and then I use the whole Adobe suite. Not that I want to. It's just that's what the universe gave me.
Right. Right.
I'm too old now to learn another app.
There's a lot out there. There's a lot of different things out there.
Yeah, I wish I knew them. I wish I knew them. I wish I was as good in TV Paint as I am in Adobe Animate. But I mean, I'm so quick in Animate that it doesn't make sense to learn a new tool at this point. I mean, actually, it does. I just don't for some reason. Old dog.
I understand. So you said you went to after this run with the commercial studio.
Yeah. You
went to Singapore, you said?
Yeah. So in 2009, phone kind of stopped ringing.
Mm-hmm.
Commercials actually similar to now, honestly. It wasn't a great time for animation.
Right.
The jobs just weren't coming in. And no, it is actually true. The climate was similar to now. It's this lull in the industry. And that was happening. And I had done a lecture. I did a lecture in Singapore at Tisch School of the Arts. The graduate program was in Singapore. And I had gone over there to do a lecture. I'm familiar with Southeast Asia. I spent a lot of time in Indonesia and in Bali mostly.
Right.
And so I was invited to go over there. I did a talk. And when I got home, they said there was a job opening the following year. And things weren't really good. I had to put a second mortgage on my house to pay my staff. I was really hurting.
Yeah, that's hard.
So it might be a good time to close up shop.
Right.
So my studio, my New York studio, was officially a failure. And so that was over, and I literally packed up the studio and I subletted my half of the studio. Tony was still there working, and I subletted my half of the studio, and I packed everything up and I moved to Singapore. I was in Singapore for 5 years.
Wow.
And I didn't make a film. I made one film early on, but I didn't really do much except teach.
Right.
And I was into teaching, but everything changed. I met my wife. And on my return, I was married, I had a child, and then I picked up right where I left off when I got back in 2014.
Right.
I started making films again, and,
wow.
Then I got into YouTube, and that's what really changed everything.
Okay. So you came back. Did you move? Okay, you live all the way out the island. I'm not saying where you're living, but you live.
Montauk, man.
Okay, you live in Montauk.
At the end, truly at the end of the line.
The end of the world. No, it's beautiful out there. Why'd you choose Montauk? Well,
I had the house, so the house was kind of back in the heyday. I had bought the house when I had some extra money, and it was a summer house. It was a house that I just went to on weekends,
right.
And it wasn't winterized. It didn't have heat or anything like that.
Right.
And when Singapore wrapped up, I just turned to my wife. I was like, "Well, I got this cottage. You want to live there? We may have to do some work on it, but that sounded appealing to me because at the time I was working from home pretty much, and
sure.
And so we moved in and winterized the house, and we live there today. We've been here. It's our 10th anniversary this year. So
wow,
actually next month or in 3 weeks.
Great.
So and it's still a little cottage, but it's nice. We only have one child, and so we're a small group.
Sure.
I like working. I always have, and that's.
Hey, look,
and I've caught up with myself now. I'm somehow I've given you the whole.
I think you have. You've given me the whole life story here. But there's something to be said. You're living where you want to live, right? It's beautiful in the area, and you don't have to deal with the rat race of Manhattan. Unless you have to go in there, you got to take a train or something.
I still go in, and I don't like it as much as I used to. I think I officially became more of a country guy,
right?
Less of a city person. But I do have to go in, to meet with clients and things of that sort. Because I still, despite being a full-time YouTuber, I still work with clients every now and then.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but really, it was interesting. The YouTube thing is interesting because it really started with that show Blank on Blank.
Mm-hmm.
We did about 100 episodes of that. It's a documentary. So I don't know if you know the show or not.
Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah.
PBS Digital produced it, and we started right when I got back in 2014.
Wow!
And that show taught me everything I knew about YouTube. And at that time, my personal channel really wasn't anything more than a showcase of my short films. It wasn't my reel. A lot of animators use YouTube just to put their reel on and stuff. They don't realize that it's an actual channel.
Yeah.
And neither did I at the time. But during Blank on Blank, I started to understand how YouTube worked better, and then just to go on this thread, not that you asked, but the YouTube thing, it was kind of a perfect storm for me because I had a catalog of short films.
Right.
It was kind of tailor made for me, and we can talk about.
I just want to stop you there. When you were in Singapore, were you still producing films while you were teaching?
No, not really.
Okay.
I was pretty much just teaching, and which is kind of sad. It's teaching. Well, you taught, so you understand. It's kind of it takes all your energy. It really does.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
There isn't a lot of time to do much else.
Right.
I did produce one film, my film Masks, which was my last hand-drawn film.
Wow.
But it took I think I took 3 years to make that film. It was really a slow go.
How long is that film?
That was a 6 to 7 minute film. Pretty long. And I mean, my films are a lot shorter now. Yeah. But it did well. It was a good film. It was, it did very well. But the next film I did wasn't until 2017.
Wow.
I just stopped doing it. And then I got so busy with Blank on Blank that, I was doing, well, technically with Blank on Blank, I was doing a film every few weeks. So, that's what it felt like anyway. And I finally did Patari in 2017, which was the first digital film I ever did.
So when you mean digital, it's just drawing on a Cintiq and then just, doing the rest, all of it digital, all of it on.
All of it digital, yeah. All of it. I'm paper free these days.
Yeah. Well, that's good. You're saving the planet. Look at it.
Yeah, saving the planet, but it's not as cool. Everyone knows it.
Right. Well, that's cool. No. So how often do you produce a film now for, because, it used, we were talking before we started recording this, and, the big problem with a lot of animators is like they say, well, I can't produce the stuff fast enough to get it out there, to get it any attention. So how did you work around that? Because I think that this is an important lesson for a lot of people listening who are interested in doing that.
Well, it's a really good question, because I think that one of the pitfalls of any short filmmaker is taking on too much. And everyone has in their head this idea of the short film they want to make, and it's this cinematic, huge thing, and you'll never do it. If you do it, it'll cost too much and it'll take too long. Right. So I've always, matter of fact, even actually every single film I've ever made, I've always tried to keep it simple, because I've always wanted to finish it. I always wanted it to be something short and manageable. Now, when I got into making digital films like Four and the other ones, I wanted to do it in a matter of months, not years. Right. So 4585 I did in 2 months. Wow. But the reason is the reason I could do it that quick is that it's one character, a single color, right? One background, literally one background for the whole thing. Right. A single idea. I kept it to 20 shots, cut by cut. And I managed to, and I woke up every morning at 4:30 in the morning, and I worked till about noon or 1 o'clock every day. Right. And then I relaxed, and I took care of myself mentally, and it was a 2-month period of unemployment. Yeah. So I wasn't, there were no commercials bogging me down or anything like that. I was worried because I had no income, right. But the short kind of grounded me, and it gave me something to do. And then I really got into it. I was like, I love this. And the film did okay in film. I was still doing I still do film festivals, but I was still only doing film festivals for shorts. Back in 2018, short films were still a calling card to get commercials. Right. So I wasn't involved in YouTube yet. But what happened was that after it did 1 year in the film festivals and won a few awards, it qualified for the Oscars, which was nice. Oh, neat. But when I put it online, it was online for a few months. It did nothing, but all of a sudden it it just hit. It just took off.
Right.
It just went like this. I'm talking, millions of views every few days. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, whoa, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And it launched the channel pretty much. And then not quite a year, a little less than a year later, we monetized the channel.
Wow.
And then the paycheck started to come in, and I realized that this is a viable way to make a living.
Right.
For the first time in my life, I could make a living doing my animated shorts, which has always been a dream of mine.
Sure.
And once you make a living at something, you find that you're a lot quicker.
Yeah.
When you have to pay your mortgage, you get your butt in gear.
You got the motivation going. Yeah.
The motivation. And also, commercials, I was less dependent on commercials, which was really nice. So that changed everything. And to answer your question about films, some films are easier than others,
Right.
The sequel to 4585, 4668, I think I did it in less than a month.
Oh, wow.
The film I'm doing right now, Broken, which is roughly in the same universe. It doesn't have wine glasses, but it's roughly in the same universe.
Right.
I'm on 6 months working on this film.
Yeah.
It's killing me. And it's probably the worst one too. But sometimes you get stuck. I kept redoing it, and my wife is on me. She's just like, "You got to finish this film. This is killing us."
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully I'll finish it this month. But it depends. And then another film, like there was another sequel to 4585 that took 3 months. There was another film, a music video I did took a month. It just like it varies. But if you spend more than a few months and you're a YouTuber, you're really asking for trouble.
Yeah.
Because it's a little better now with shorts. Shorts kind of can keep your channel alive through the dark times, but it's tough. You really YouTube the algorithm expects you to produce, and it punishes you if you don't.
Yeah, I know that. We're trying to launch a channel too. We're trying to do some short cartoons, and we're trying to keep them around 2 minutes, somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes.
Oh, that's a good length. Especially if you can pull some 1 minute shorts out of that too. The YouTube Shorts program can really get your subscriber count up there.
Yeah. I was we were thinking about it, we were talking about it, and even showing pencil tests, showing some brief 30-second things of. I know you've done a trailer for the new one, which it's called Broken, right? I don't know if that came across on here. That's why I'm saying it again.
New film is called Broken. The trailer. I'm almost there. I got one more short to animate. I redid the entire beginning around the time it was supposed to be released.
Right.
I just played it. Well, I do this thing where this is interesting YouTube stuff. I don't know if any other animator does this, honestly. This was kind of my own discovery. Is I will pre-release a film. I have a few ways of doing this, kind of on the down low. So my subscribers don't even know it's there.
Right.
But I get a couple hundred, not 100. I get like 10,000 views.
Right.
Kind of under the radar, and I take the analytics and I can see where people lose interest.
Right.
And it's kind of like the ultimate focus group, Yeah. And I was looking at this film and I realized that the critical part of the film in the beginning, I was losing too much of the audience. You always lose a lot of audience in the beginning, but this was drastic. And I also saw that it bounced back up near the end. And I've never had that before. And I looked at it and was like, I messed up the beginning. There's something. I did something wrong in the beginning because people are swiping away.
Right.
Yeah, and so I looked at the film again, and just objectively speaking, I looked at it. I said the beginning's boring.
Yeah,
there's nothing happening. There's no energy in the beginning. It's like a long pan, which always kills you.
Yeah,
a long pan.
Go ahead. No, what I was saying.
I redid it. Yeah, I redid the whole beginning.
That's similar to like a lot of the studios would like put a movie out like weeks before, and they would actually gauge audience reaction. They would have like little cards where they write what they liked, what they didn't like about it, and stuff like that. So it's almost
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, back in the early the early 2000s, me and Bill Plimpton, actually, we were doing a lot of film festivals together. We got into the habit of screening rough cuts to audiences.
Right.
And what you do is at the Q&A, you would actually flip the Q&A. You would ask the audience the questions in the Q&A, and they always loved it. They always loved it. Yeah. And we would say, oh, what did you like about this? What wasn't working? You know, and they knew it was a rough because half of it was colored or something like that. And Bill did it first, and then I realized how useful it was. So I started doing it. And it's very similar to that, except it's the new media version of that. And instead of an auditorium filled with 20 people, this is an auditorium of 10,000 people. So it's it's really utilizing the tools, the new media tools that are available to us now.
Right. That's
and I don't think enough animators do this. I really don't. It's right there for you to use.
I think some of that has to do with ego. That they don't want. They don't want that. They want to put their vision out there, put it out there, and whether it succeeds or it dies, they don't care.
The irony about that is it will always be your vision. You're creating the film. What you're actually doing is you're fine tuning the vision to communicate to the best it can be.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with tuning something. It's editing, basic editing. Keep redoing the timing, trimming things. This is nothing new. Filmmakers have been doing this since the beginning. So
absolutely, yeah.
But I have, just like you said, I sense pushback from animators. They're saying that you're putting too much emphasis on what the audience wants, and perhaps that's true. But I'm in the business of communicating with the audience. I'm not making this film for me or my family or my mom. This is for the audience. I'm trying to communicate an idea.
Right.
And if I can fine tune that communication so the idea is communicated the best possible, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I use the tools for.
No, I think that's good. I think it sharpens you too as a filmmaker, because you are, the term animator, it just sounds to me as not a strong enough word. You are a filmmaker. You're making your film, and you're showing your vision, and a lot of it's, and most of it's from deep inside you. It's your
always.
Yeah. So everybody wants to put a film out there and be accepted. So you're just going that extra step to just make sure it's communicating. So.
Absolutely. And, those of us who are compelled to make shorts, we have these ideas in us, and they have to come out, these stories. Well, for me, there are more ideas than stories, but I develop the ideas into stories. And I don't know, it's what I think about, it's what I do. And I want to make sure they work, and also, again, to reiterate, when you're making a living doing this, it takes up another meaning. This isn't, I'm not making this film to get into Annecy. I'm making this film to engage viewers, so they make money. It's an important element, and money is a product of engagement. So the better you make the film, hopefully, the more revenue it brings in, which is that's nothing new.
No, it's nothing new. That's what the studios do all the time. Yeah. But what you're doing is you're coming up with an idea, and you're pushing through with your creativity. So, you're just molding it so that people like it better. So, yeah, nothing wrong with that. I really like the films. I really love the Poor series, which is it's very bizarre to me, but at the same time, it is so creative, and the characters are simple, but they're not so simple. The expressions are really, really super, and there are certain themes in these films which I just want to briefly talk about, because it seems like there is, always, this character that's a little bit more powerful than the rest. And there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of, which is great. It's great. You need that for a film. You need the weak character, you need the strong character and stuff like that. But it just seems to be really emphasized in that series. And can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit it. I think I think you have some pretty good insight there. I'm fascinated by the relationship between two characters and the power struggle between them. So, inadvertently, you always have one that is larger than the other, which is, that's a contrast in scale, and scale is a powerful tool for filmmakers to use.
Right.
That idea, and then of course the metaphor of pouring the contents in your head into another's head is an obvious metaphor for passing knowledge.
Yes.
But also that could also be a metaphor for a lot of things like indoctrination, or maybe things that are a little more dystopian. In Poor 585, the original one, there was like this character was force fed the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
He was literally held and filled up, which caused a problem, which caused a break in the cycle, the ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was which I considered to be the victim, he became the new tyrant. And well, if you've seen any of my films, there's always a cycle. I love cycles because life is a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the main idea for that film, was that the victim becomes the tyrant until there's a new victim, and then they become the tyrant.
Right.
And it's like a revolutionary type of thing. And I love that. I love that idea, and it's probably something you can see manifested in almost every single one of my films.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. in different ways,
Yeah.
Perhaps the films are a little more personal, like Patari, for example, when the guy fits his head into the wall.
Love it. I just watched it last night.
Great.
And he's playfully bursting. He's fitting his head in and bursting these I don't know, boulders.
Yeah.
And then he gets to the one that's basically a little bit more of a struggle. Kind of overtake. Yeah, I don't want to give away what happens, but
no, it's that film was a metaphor for when I met my wife.
Mm-hmm.
She was the boulder at the end. She was the rock at the end, and it stopped me. It stopped me pretty quickly, and it stopped my cycle of destruction that I was involved in, and really saved me in a lot of ways. And she also she resonated out and strengthened others. So that and literally I just described the film. So and that's what that was about. So there's when you approach a short film, there's a few ways to go about it, and one is the personal, one is the more ideological, which is just simply something you have in your head that you want to express. But I think inevitably that personal thing gets in there somehow.
Yeah. How do you come up with your ideas for your shorts? Do you have you have a dream and all of a sudden I used
never a dream. Dreams are always pretty boring. But no, I don't know. I just have these thoughts in my brain for some reason. I love the idea of what if I make a person crawling out of another person's mouth?
Right.
And then I actually, to be honest, I kind of find the meaning later. You go, well, it's in you. The meaning is in you. You just kind of have to find it.
Right.
There's a reason why you thought of that image.
Sure.
There's a reason. And then again, sometimes, you're watching some animation or you're at a film festival and you get an idea based on someone else's work.
Right.
You're like, wow, he should have gone this way, or he or she should have gone this way.
Right.
And that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nothing like the thing you originally saw, of course. But the impetus was some type of visual cue that you got from someone else. That I don't have an example of that, but that happens quite often.
Yeah.
But usually they're just simple things I do in my sketchbook, like just a weird idea, oh, look, here's a little tiny guy with a remote control and he's controlling a larger guy.
Right.
That I draw that that's actually for real. I draw that in my sketchbook all the time. I've never made a film about it. Mm-hmm. I will. Someday I'll be like, maybe I'll use this image and I'll build a narrative around it.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. I used to get a lot of ideas just driving. And sometimes just bore, you drive and then it's basically, it's first 5 minutes, you're alert throughout the whole thing, but it just kind of becomes like if you're going down the same roads and stuff like that, it's almost like if you're not listening to anything, it's kind of like you get all these thoughts in your head and something pops in, and it's crazy where this stuff comes from. I always wonder about that, but.
Yeah, I teach animation still. I teach a story class at Sarah Lawrence, and one of the things I focus on is developing first that image, that first sketch, that first idea. That first idea, there's no story yet.
Right.
Like the first idea of dumping the contents of your head into another person, the first idea of someone crawling out of your mouth, the first idea of a person with remote control, controlling a larger person. It's like we have, most of us have these kind of weird images in our brain.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of the next step is developing that into the story.
Right.
And that's really the fun part. The hard part is actually making the film.
It's always hard.
The hard part is drawing it and animating.
You know what the hardest part for me is? Actually starting that film, just starting the storyboard of it.
Oh wow! Yeah,
and I've learned, and I've storyboarded a lot of stuff for like the studios in California and here in New York too. But the first drawing is always the hardest for me on a storyboard panel, and I've come to realize just start drawing. Start doing it, because if you take too much time to think about it, then you're just not going to. It's going to take you forever to get it going. So just start drawing anything. Just scribble something. And then eventually, and I find once I get a couple of pages into it, now I'm actually drawing better. Drawing the angles better and stuff like that. And I'm really thinking about it, but it always seems to be like the hardest thing for me, that just to get going, just to start. So,
well, there's also the whole blank page syndrome. You just, it's always difficult to start.
Well, because you're setting the stage for what's to follow, and it's like, but if you just get too wrapped up in that, sometimes it just forces you to stop.
Yeah.
So I always find it's better just dive in, just start writing. It's the same thing. I've heard this about people who write, and they don't know. They're thinking of the perfect line for that first page, right? And they're getting so hung up on that line that they're losing focus for the rest of the thing. So
yeah.
So I think it's the same thing. I think you just start, you just write anything, just draw anything, and then eventually it's gonna, and you can always go back and fix the beginning of it. So
yeah,
that's my advice for anybody listening to this. But
that's good advice. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think you've become, because I looked at some of your earlier stuff, and then I look at the stuff you're doing now, and you've definitely evolved as an artist. The drawing is so much more wonderful. It has a lot of appeal to it. Your expressions are pretty amazing, and especially with the sinister expressions, you really get into it.
Yeah, I like the dark stuff. I've always been more into the darker themes.
Yeah, but I see a lot of Chuck Jones in you, which is
all right. Well,
yeah,
that's a huge
and I think it's because of the expressions and the body attitudes and your timing. Bill Hanna of Hanna-Barbera, he was not an artist. He was a timer. He came into the animation field as a timer, and so that's really really important. And the story is really important. I've learned there are animators out there that can't tell a story at all for a minute. And, so that's really big. So, I really admire what you've done. I think it's pretty amazing that you've been able to do this stuff and to make a living as an independent animator, because there are a lot of people that can't. And I think there was something I read about you where you were trying to impart this knowledge about how to be successful as a YouTuber, and I heard the audience just turned off on you. Like,
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's happening. It's still happening now. There's still a disdain for YouTube. I think it's left over from when YouTube was, a place where you put your cat videos, and it just, I don't think people have quite caught up with it yet, and they still cling to things like Vimeo, which is really a complete waste at this point.
Yeah.
And or any other of these apps that actually don't even that don't take creators seriously. You know, I'm not that I have anything against a tool like Vimeo, but it's not a place where you can make a living.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. People still don't like YouTube. Younger people have no problem. It's only the older people that seem to not want to do it, and it's really too bad because you know, there are literally millions of people out there hungry for animated content.
Sure.
And they're not getting it. You know, they're just not getting it. They're getting mine, and maybe a handful of other animators that are truly taking advantage of the platform.
Well, you're doing something that's very fresh and different.
It's new. Yeah, it's newer than people think. Even though YouTube has been around since 2003.
Yeah.
The serious filmmakers haven't been on YouTube. They just haven't been there. They're starting to come there now because, you know, remember, YouTube used to be the resolution was crappy, the algorithm was annoying, but that's not like it's not like that anymore.
No, it's a streaming app, just like Netflix is, or
yeah.
You know, I
you have your own channel. You know, you have your own channel.
Yeah,
and that's the one of the things that people mistake about YouTube is they think it's like your Facebook page, but it's not.
No,
it's your channel, and you have to craft it like it's a Netflix channel,
right?
You know? And so it really is it's a different way of thinking about it, and yet we have to get out. And I can't believe the old mode of thinking about YouTube is still around. You know, it's but.
I think I know why, and I think it's because the perception was you could not make money with YouTube. I think that was the early, like you'd put stuff on and basically you get pennies, and even if the video was widely distributed, people were not making any money off of it. So that stigma has stayed with them,
and it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah,
it's
right.
This isn't a gift. This isn't just a thing that's given to you. This is you know, it took me a decade to learn how to do YouTube, you know, until, you know, and then I had the fortune of having a viral hit, which you actually have to have a viral hit.
Yeah.
Just one, though. All it takes is one.
Right.
Then you can. But I've seen a lot of animators have a viral hit and they don't do anything with it. They just, I don't know. They decide that I guess they don't want to do that, you know.
How do you maximize a viral hit? So what was how many people were watching it when it was viral?
I've had a couple. The first viral actually wasn't 4585. It was Handshake.
Oh, okay.
It was a smaller scale viral hit, but at the time I had a partner, which I don't recommend. You can do a partner with another channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I was part of Frederator. You know Frederator.
Yeah.
So I was
Fred Seibert. Yeah,
Fred Seibert. Mm-hmm. And I was under them for a while when Handshake did really well, and we were splitting revenue. And I kind of realized, I was like, you know, why am I splitting revenue here? Mm-hmm. And I had to break off with them, which was a pain.
Yeah.
To break off, and then Handshake stopped going viral, which I thought was interesting. I was like, okay, wait. Like the algorithm is really weird, you know. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you end your partnership and then it yanks it off of the algorithm. It didn't make sense.
Right.
But that was then. This is now. You know, the algorithm has changed a lot. So, to answer your question, to maximize one viral hit is a process of several things. You take it, first of all, very easy is you take advantage of end screens. End screens are the links at the end of a video.
Yes.
Where you have the opportunity to put up to 4 videos that someone could click on.
Right.
That's key. So you get another film. First of all, this is assuming that you have multiple films.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
You can't do this if you don't have another film.
Right.
Make some films, but you put an end screen on that, and if you have a viral hit, that next one will also go viral just based on the end screen clicks of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a few other things. YouTube loves sequels. Mm-hmm. So and I have no problem with sequels. I had never really done one, but when I did the first one, Poor 668, it was a year or so, maybe even more than a year after Poor 585.
Right.
And that lesson, I got hit really hard with that lesson. I was like, wow, because that thing just exploded. The sequel. It did better than 585 in the beginning. Right. And I was like, okay, sequels, good. Like good. And then it also has to do with maintaining a brand and a style. So, I would put up a completely different video. It's going to have, that video is going to have to earn its own keep.
Right.
It's not the same style. It's harder. And this is why, like, for example, my new film Broken, it's a completely different film, but it's roughly in the same style. Like, it's kind of like they are these glass characters filled with liquid, but they're not glass. So I'm hoping to transition away from the glasses because I'm a little tired of drawing wine glasses. So that's what I was hoping for this new film. Yeah. And I do like liquid. I do enjoy animating the dynamics of liquid, and people seem to appreciate it. And then there's other things you can take advantage of. For example, if you get to know people in your community on YouTube, right? You can cross promote again with end screens. You can cross promote. Like let's say if Pest, the animator Pest, he has his audience, I have mine. They're two completely different audiences. If we share end screens, we're kind of sharing audiences. We both have over 1 million subscribers. Right. All of a sudden, this whole other group of people that are into animation are exposed to your film. So, correlating with other creators is very important. And that's how that's how you can retain this. Also, a couple of other, I could talk about this for 3 hours, by the way. But another thing is engaging your audience. Like, it's shocking how many animators just refuse to engage. Like, people ask you questions in comments. Take some time and answer the damn questions, Yeah. Like, I spend a half hour every morning answering comments. Right. That's what I do. Every morning for the last 4 years of my life. I've sat down on YouTube and I've hearted comments. I've replied. I've done all this and I've made friends. I've made fans. You develop this rapport with your audience. Right. It's no different than a Q&A after a film festival screening. Yeah. Yeah. But it's just a lot bigger. And I think that is another thing that keeps the ball rolling. Right. The goal is there's a term in YouTube called evergreen. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but evergreen is the goal in YouTube. Evergreen content means it's always viral. It's always green. Right. It's always fresh. Oh, it keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. Yeah. Now, the great thing about animation is very well situated to be evergreen. Right. It's not based on current events. It's not. It has this appeal that will never end. Like, technically, Poor 585 could get a whole nother audience. This year, even though it went viral years ago. Right. A new generation is coming, and they might get into it. That's the goal in YouTube, is to be evergreen. And, have you ever thought about taking all your films and putting them together and going on the road and like appearing like at not Comic-Cons and stuff like that, but actually going and, like over here we have the Patchogue Theater, which they had somebody over there from some TV show and they're talking about paranormal stuff. And I think about that all the time because there was a show over here that actually was close to me, but it's all around the country, and it's Animaniacs in concert. And all they're doing is performing the cartoons live with the real actors from the voice actors. And it's an interesting thing. And it's been going around the country, around the world. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think there are animators that can do this, like animators like maybe Bill Plimpton or Don Hertzfeldt. Right. I don't think I'm one of those. I don't think anyone would. I don't think I could pack a house. That said, I do retrospectives at film festivals sometimes, and this fall I'm doing one in upstate New York in a theater, just like you described. Yeah. But I highly doubt there'll be more than 20 people there. It's just I still do independent stuff. I'm pretty obscure. You do independent stuff, but you still have an audience of. You have over 100 million subscribers, right? Yeah, but a lot of those are international. So I don't know. the United States doesn't have a passion for animation like a lot of other countries.
No, it doesn't.
It's I don't know, and I mean, a majority of my subscribers are Eastern Europe, Vietnam, Brazil,
Right.
India.
Wow.
Actually, I'm willing to bet if I traveled through Vietnam, I would probably get some attention. I seriously, I actually think that because my films resonate in Vietnam for some reason.
Wow.
There's a large constituent there. And I was also in South America, I did a show and it was pretty well attended.
Right.
This was in Peru.
Wow.
That was a few years ago. That's pretty good. But but in all, I'm pretty much resigned to the fact of being fairly obscure.
Well, I think your stuff is wonderful.
Well, I really appreciate that.
And yeah, I've been in the business for a long time. This show goes around the world, so got a lot of people from all over Japan listening to this. And
oh, that's great. Japan is a tough market. It's kind of like the UK. They have so much animation, native animation, that it's tough for a foreigner to get a foothold there.
Well, I don't know. They like American animation, though. They are big fans of this stuff. So
maybe I'll get my wife is Japanese. Maybe I'll get her to do some marketing in Japan.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, so the new film is Broken. When is that coming out?
Realistically, like I could literally bring up my schedule right now. I got one or two more shots to animate and maybe a handful of shots to color.
Right.
I'll probably be done in well, I actually the trailer said June, so apparently I have to finish before June.
Yeah, you got to hit it.
It should be done by the end of June. Yeah.
So is that going to go directly to YouTube, or are you going to put it in festivals first?
Yeah, I'll do it directly to YouTube. I'm playing with a few things on YouTube. There's a lot of new things they're offering. I try to stay up to date with the features on YouTube.
Right.
Like, for example, you can premiere a film only to your members, which is interesting. Members are people that actually pay every month for your content. And I don't have many, but that could be something that I want to explore. I might play with that. But generally speaking, my subscribers on YouTube are asking for it, so I'll probably just put it up. I'm sure
that, yeah.
And they're loyal, man. They watch it. They tune in the second I put it up.
Right.
They watch it, so it's really cool.
I know you've put up some making of stuff, like you've shown, I guess, storyboard, like you show storyboard and then layout or rough animation.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is for members only, but yeah, I put a lot of that stuff on. That stuff never really does all of that well.
Right.
The views come from the stories.
Yeah. And
I don't know, a majority of people are just there for the stories. I don't know if they care about the nuts and bolts behind it.
Right.
But it's interesting nonetheless for somebody, so I usually put it up there.
Have you ever shown the entire process, like a behind the scenes, like, follow me, I'll show you how I do stuff, and then you...
No, I never have.
That might be something that you may want to explore, with a...
No, I'd like to. I haven't really done that. I have a lot of ideas of stuff to do on YouTube, but I end up just spending all my time making the films.
Right.
I'd like to do something like that, or maybe even film a lecture or something like that.
Yeah, I think people would be fascinated with that stuff, and especially coming from you. Yeah,
the membership element of YouTube is unexplored. I think it's very similar to Patreon,
right?
And I think a lot of people don't take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because people on YouTube, generally speaking, don't participate in it. But it's something that would be interesting to see how many people would actually pay to see videos every month.
Yeah,
but then you have to produce them, So
yeah, you got to spend a day. It's going to take a little bit away from the other thing, but you're going to get more content. So just an idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, Patrick, thank you. Thank you for coming on here and talking about your career in animation.
Yeah, that's over an hour, isn't it? Amazing.
It's just a little bit over. Yeah, it kind of flew by. It felt like 5 minutes.
Yeah, it does feel quick to get going.
But no, I thank you for coming on here. I think I think this is going to be a great show for people who really want to learn a little bit about YouTube and, seeing how you've made it a success for yourself. And I wish you much more continued success. And
well, thanks. I also appreciate you doing things like this. These type of shows are. This is what makes independent animation possible. I always say on social media is like, if you want to support an artist, watch their interview, share their work, like their work. Mm-hmm. It's a whole new world that we live in now with social media, and this type of thing is a huge part of it. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Well, wasn't that interesting? Patrick Smith. We're going to have Patrick back, hopefully, when he has another film coming out. We'll talk about that on a future show, so stay tuned. Well, if you have any ideas or comments or anything, there's a chat feature on basically on the podcast, and it's offered by pretty much all the services that carry this. You can click on that, and you can make a suggestion for a guest or maybe a segment on the show or anything. Even if you just want to say hello and say if you like the show and what you like about the show, it's all appreciated. We got a lot of great guests coming up in the future. And so we have a wonderful lineup. Next week's guest, if you check into Cartoonerific News on Tuesday night, you'll find out who the next week's guest is. So, check that out. Marjorie does that, and she does a great job, I think. Anyway, if you really like the podcast, please let a friend know, or even better yet, if you're on Facebook, please share. Whenever we post a new podcast, please share that to your friends. And this way you're helping us out. This way we're spreading the word about the podcast and you're telling your friends about it. So that's a wonderful thing. If you really, really like what we're doing and you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We're on basically every service out there. Well, not everyone, but most of them. And so we're on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and a whole bunch. So, just hit the subscribe button. This way you'll be notified every time a brand new Cartoonerific podcast is uploaded for your listening pleasure. There you go. I said it. Anyway, we'll be back next Friday with more. So I just want you all to have a great weekend. I want you to have a great week. And we'll see you all again next time on the Cartoonerific podcast. Take care, everybody.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.